So this is a common complaint among Nintendo fans, that they just don't make too many games in their slightly less successful series. They focus a lot on their core franchises, so that would include Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, and I'd say Splatoon will probably be joining those ranks. But a company such as Nintendo has a very wide array of intellectual properties, everything from F-Zero to Star Tropics to Kid Icarus to Ice Climbers to Punch-Out, the list goes on, or even Metroid is one that a lot of people want to see come back in a form that maybe isn't Metroid Federation Force, but that game wasn't as bad as everyone thought. It was good on its own merits. But once again, people do want a return to that sort of atmospheric Metroid game. By the same token though, you've got to wonder, they've got to have a reason not for doing this. And I think personally that they have two reasons. So let's start with the first one and the more cynical of the two, economic. I'll take F-Zero as an example for this. F-Zero GX did not sell very well. Now you could attribute that to it being GameCube, which wasn't the most successful console of all time. But it really didn't sell that much even when compared to other games on the system. When you see how much Smash Melee sold and how much Mario Kart sold, it really didn't sell that well. But on the other hand, you take something which has a lot of sales, such as the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and it has gone through, like, there's 5 iterations of it at this stage. The game is an eternal cash cow, despite what some fans may think. And this is worrying, alright, that they're only focusing on these core franchises, because it does lead to a sort of homogenization of the games that they're bleeding out. For example, there is a bit of an oversaturation of 2D platformers coming out of Nintendo. But that being said, and this is why I'm going to move on to my second point now, which is newness, they always try to incorporate something new into these games. So, for example, let's take the new Super Mario Bros. Series. The first one was an homage to the original Mario Bros, but the second one then added in, this was the one on the Wii, not New Super Mario Bros. 2. The second one added in 4-player multiplayer, which changed the dynamic. They also added in all those coin gimmicks in New Super Mario Bros. 2. Now, while New Super Mario Bros. 2, you can argue how successful they were with that. That game was just really kind of boring and dull, to be frank. But they did try something new. You also get to New Super Mario Bros. U. They added in the block mechanic, which really didn't change much. But you go on to New Super Luigi Bros., where they changed how the jump mechanic worked, where now Luigi jumped higher, but he was also a bit slippier than Mario classically is. And this changed the dynamic again. Also adding in the new 100-second time limit put a bit more of a rush on the level. It meant you had to go from place to place a lot faster, and it made the game a lot harder. And this is an example of how just adding one new thing, even something that seems very simple, like changing the jump height and changing the time limit on each stage, completely changed some of the levels, and it created some of the most inventive levels that New Super Mario Bros. Has seen since the first iteration, really. But you then take F-Zero, for example, it has barely changed. I think Miyamoto said this as well, that the series hasn't evolved much. There was the SNES version, and then there was F-Zero X, which was a 3D version of that. But beyond that, you get onto the 6th generation F-Zero games. You get the ones for the Game Boy Advance, such as GP Legend, I think it is, and there's another one, but I can never remember the name of it. But they're just the SNES one, essentially, with new levels. Then you get on to F-Zero GX, which is essentially just a larger, more bombastic version of F-Zero X, missing the Japan-only expansion kit feature of being able to edit the tracks, but other than that, it's just really taking the base F-Zero X game, making new tracks, better graphics, and Bob's Your Uncle. They did add in the story mode, but it really doesn't change how you play the game. That's just a cool extra thing. It's like in Smash Bros. Brawl. People like the cutscenes, but the Subspace Emissary itself wasn't the most interesting thing we'd ever seen. So, am I saying this gives them a free pass, that maybe there's nothing left to do with the F-Zero franchise? No. For example, we'll get onto Fast Racing Neo, which was a racing game made by indie developer Shinen. That game is great. It's on the Wii U. It also just got a physical release, so definitely you should check that out. But it added an Ikaruga style color changing mechanic, which really changed the dynamic of the game, because it allowed you, basically, if you, there were orange pads and blue pads, and you would get a speed boost if your color on your car matched the color on the strip, but you would get pushed back if not, and you would be able to switch between these two colors. So in frantic moments you would be sliding off one pad and then having to quickly change to the next to get the max amount of speed going down a particular straight. And this meant that not just cornering was interesting, but, you know, going down straights you could now have a little bit more, straights could basically be more dynamic. Man, I am using that word a lot in this video. But in the defense of Nintendo, you could have probably taken the best Nintendo developers and designers, and if you'd locked them in a room for 1,000 years, they may not have come up with that, because maybe it just wasn't something that had ever occurred to them. And I don't think you should try to force ideas as well. We've seen games come out and receive mixed critical reception for just trying to do something new with them. For example, when Nintendo was trying to come up with a new way of using the Wii U gamepad that worked in single player as opposed to just their multiplayer success, which is all they'd really found up to that point, they came up with Star Fox Zero, and they tried to revive a classic franchise with it. But the problem was that just the concept wasn't really developed enough. They didn't quite have it perfect. While I still enjoyed Star Fox Zero, the whole thing never quite meshed. The fact that you were switching between the TV and the gamepad, it was just something that you had to learn, and it was less accessible, and it paid for it in critical reception and sales, and so Nintendo will probably be shyer to making new Star Fox games now, because they've tried something new and it didn't work. While I do think Star Fox Zero is a good game personally, it's the fourth game in a long string of the series that has received mixed critical reception, because they haven't really been able to do something new that's really worked. Now, I also love Star Fox Command, which I think is better than Zero, but also that game didn't do the best. You go back to Assault, they had all the land sections, which really didn't change the R-Wing sections. It was just adding needless dichotomy within the gameplay and contrast that didn't, well, as I said, needless, it didn't need to be there. Then you go back to Star Fox Adventures, which wasn't really even a Star Fox game at all. It was just a kind of Zelda clone with the Star Fox moniker put on it. In fact, that game didn't have much original to it at all, and for that reason, it was a very dull and drab game. I don't like Star Fox Adventures, frankly. I think the only real solution is they need to start getting a lot more new developers in. They did this in Splatoon, and it paid off for them in bucket loads. Also, the guy who directed Super Mario Maker was somebody who was traditionally a programmer, to my knowledge. He had never directed a game up until that point. And that is really something that they need to embrace going forward, because as great as developers such as Miyamoto or Eiji Aonuma are, you know, they're getting on. And perhaps they're starting to run out of ideas. I'm not saying they are, but perhaps. So I think certainly asking newer developers to step up to the plate, to start coming up with new ideas and concepts will definitely start to broaden their portfolio in terms of what they're producing at the moment. Will it mean that old franchises will get revived? Maybe not, but perhaps we can get new franchises that will sort of broaden, at least from an aesthetical standpoint, the range of games that Nintendo is putting out. Because there are genres that they don't touch much, for example shooters, and they did with Splatoon, and it, as I said, paid off. So it's definitely something they should think about doing. But regardless of that, please leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Please like the video if you liked it. It was probably a bit rambly, but I like to think I've made some sort of interesting point here. So yeah, like the video if you found it food for thought, and also please subscribe if you have not already. Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for watching, and while you're at it, why not check out some of these other videos?